Okay, well, it's 1 p.m. and we have a lot to cover today. So we'll go ahead and start as folks continue to trickle in. I want to just say welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Sarah Reed. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Atlantic, and I will be playing your role of host today. And today we're really focused on spending time together talking about something that's getting a lot of attention right now, which is AI. But more importantly, what it actually takes to make AI work inside your organization. So this session is really about going beyond the hype. And the big idea we'll continue to come back to throughout this session is that AI isn't the hard part. The focus for you and for your organization really needs to be on the foundation underneath it. So before we jump in, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. This will be a 45-minute presentation with additional time at the end for Q&A, but go ahead and feel free to drop your questions into the question box at any point during the presentation. We'll either address them as we go or we'll circle back to them at the end. And then I do want to mention that we will be sending out a copy of the deck, and we are recording the session, so you'll also get a full recording of the session, and you'll likely see that in your inbox first thing tomorrow morning. So with that, let's take a look at what we have planned for today. We're going to start off with introductions, and then we'll take a quick look at the current state of AI, so what's actually happening versus what's being talked about. And then we'll talk through some of the key themes that are coming out of Microsoft, focusing on what's changed and why it matters. And then from there, we will show you Microsoft Fabric in action, so some live demos of how this all comes together in real life scenarios. And then, of course, we'll bring it back to what that means for you and your organization and what steps you should be thinking about next. And then, as I mentioned, we will wrap it up with a Q&A. So please don't hesitate to put any and all questions into the question box as we go. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you, Sarah. Excited to be here today. It's going to be a fun 45 minutes kind of walking through some of the latest and greatest out there in the market.
Yep.
Some live demos to show everybody as well. So quick intro, I can jump it off, but I'm Jordan Berry, the General Manager of Data Analytics here at Atlantic. And really our focus is helping mid-market companies prepare for and operate tools to support analytics and AI. And so what that often looks like is Microsoft Fabric, Power BI, and the whole suite of Copilot tools that exist out there. So excited to explore those a little bit today and kind of talk about how we go beyond that hype and make it real.
Great, and I'm Tony Berry. I'm Director of Business Development at Atlantic, and I get to do some of the demos today. So looking forward to that. But as Jordan mentioned, we're going to cover a lot of things in terms of Fabric and the data foundation, and how you then put AI on top of that. So quite excited to share, and please ask us any questions as we go through this today.
Great.
Fantastic. I think we've got a little bit of a question for the audience to kick things off, right, Sarah?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and launch the poll, but this will just give us a sense of where everyone is at to help us structure the conversation. But how ready is your organization for AI is the question. And there's no wrong answers here, and it's anonymous, so be honest. But the options are, we're just starting to explore how to use AI effectively. We started using AI tools but don't have a strategy in place. We're developing our AI strategy now. We have a strategy, but gaps still exist. And we're executing a well-defined strategy. So I'll give everyone a few seconds to respond to that. Any guesses, Tony and Jordan, where people will land?
I think that probably everybody's at least started. I don't think you have a choice anymore on whether to start or not, right?
Yep, that's right. All right, let's see where we're at. Looks like we're about a 30-30-30 on between we're just starting and we're developing a strategy. So I don't think any surprises here, but you're in the right place today.
Awesome. I think that's super helpful because it really mirrors kind of what we're hearing out in the market as well. And to kind of kick us off, wanted to level set on kind of what we're hearing out there and some of the benchmarks, because I do think it kind of accurately reflects those that are in the room. But one of the things that we're hearing, and maybe you guys are feeling it, is kind of the AI fatigue and the idea that there's all these AI headlines. It's constantly in the news. It's constantly changing and evolving. We're all having to kind of recalibrate and understand kind of, what is AI today, because it's different than what it was 2 weeks ago. And so one of the things that we're often hearing is that AI is really dominating that conversation. But what you're not hearing as much is, hey, here's how we're really getting tangible ROI and value out of AI, right? And so that's really what we're here to focus on today. And so if you look at, kind of the market at large, close to 80%, 78%, are saying that AI is a top priority. And one of the biggest shifts that we're seeing from 2025 to 2026 is actual dollars and investments going into the space. About a year ago, we were hearing a lot about pilots and kind of sequestering small budgets to focus on this. You were seeing organizations now truly make it an investment category to kind of focus their energy and efforts. But if you look at it, about 1 in 4 are actually reporting measurable businesses. So if you're one of those 4, you're likely kind of out in front. If you're not, that's totally normal. And that's really kind of what we're observing today, is a bit of what we heard in the survey, that folks are on the path to the journey, but maybe not getting that tangible value. And when you peel back all the covers, you might think, hey, is it selecting the right model? Is it understanding all the nuances that are holding us back? Why aren't we that 1 of 4? And overwhelmingly, it becomes the data and kind of the unsexy, challenging pieces that have always been there, is getting your siloed systems and data in a place that it can be consumed for agents as well as for humans. That part hasn't changed. So really the takeaway is the ambition is there, and we think that human ambition is going to continue to grow and expand. And so how do we support our organizations in setting ourselves up for success, both for today and for tomorrow? So excited to dive into that a little bit as well. And so kind of based on that premise, we did want to touch on a little bit. So as part of leading in the space, we attend a lot of different conferences. One of the key ones was the Microsoft Fabric conference in March in Atlanta. And so one of the kind of key elements that we're seeing and that we heard, attending the dozens of sessions while we were on site, was that AI is really only as valuable as that data platform behind it. And so one of the things that we're really seeing, both in hearing it at these conferences, but also participating in sessions with our clients, is that if you were to swap out models, if you were to swap out harnesses, which is the new buzzword, the difference between picking OpenAI models or Anthropic models, it isn't the model that's really becoming commoditized in some way. It's really that data, right? So 2 customers asking the exact same question with AI, one gets a very clear, succinct, actionable answer. The other gets, I don't know, I can't access those systems or data, or I don't have the knowledge around what it is. And so, really what we're seeing out in the market is that, if you don't have a data platform in place, you're often struggling with fragmented data sources, right? Maybe you've, invested in best of breed technologies, the best CRM, the best ERP, fantastic from an operational standpoint, quite challenging from an analytics and AI standpoint. So how do you build that kind of unified foundation to kick things off? The other thing that we heard quite often was, hey, yeah, we do our reporting every quarter. We do a lot of look back reporting. How did we do last month, last quarter? In this ever changing, fast-paced world that we live in, that's no longer cutting edge. The ability to ingest and understand data in a more near real-time way, and not only just understand it, but take action on it, that's really kind of the new frontier that folks are able to lean into with tools like Fabric. And then even more so that governance side. And so this is probably, knowing that Atlantic has a very deep IT and security history and knowledge base, this is something that we are very mindful of and aware of, is, how do you govern and manage not only a unified data estate, but everything that's consuming the data out of that platform. So kind of key theme, and you'll hear it throughout today, is, really AI is only as valuable as data, and that platform on which the data is, managed and maintained is just as essential. And so what were kind of the key takeaways? So we went to the conference, like I mentioned, we were part of a lot of sessions. We had a chance to participate both in learning what Microsoft is doing along with kind of their peer set in the market. We had a chance to talk to prospects and customers to really understand kind of what is the state of data. And there were really kind of 4 signals that came out, 4 themes that we wanted to kind of relay and share with our insider group here today. The first one is really that single platform is where people are succeeding. So Obviously, we're a little bit biased around Microsoft Fabric being that holistic one-stop for data. But if you look at other folks that are out there, the challenge is just that if you want to build a modern data platform from scratch, you've got to buy an ETL tool, a storage tool, a management tool, a machine learning tool, a visualization tool. All of a sudden, you've got 10 vendors, 10 contracts, 10 things you're managing, all before you can even get started. So that's where we recommend is really focus on, can you quickly get to that single platform that can support you today, but also support you 3 or 4 years from now, where your data has scaled, your usage has scaled. So really just being able to quickly make a sound decision on the platform is what we're seeing a lot of folks that are being successful with are doing. Kind of the second piece is agents, as probably isn't a new term for anybody. It's definitely the word of the year of 2025. But probably the biggest thing is that agents are now going from preview or kind of early state pilots to now GA or generally available. Particularly data agents in Microsoft Fabric are quite impressive. Really, the idea here is that when we ask natural language queries of our data, we want to get the right answer. And the one I love to kind of bring up is, what were our top 10 customers? That seems like a simple thing for people. Well, what does top mean? Is top by revenue? Is top by engagement? What is a customer? Is that someone that is active with us or has ever spent money with us? And so really what a data agent allows us to do is kind of guardrail and tell the agent specifically what we mean, and not have to define all those queries. We can kind of generally tell it what we want. And then when you ask questions, it's actually able to get the right answer. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. I think Tony's going to show some of those capabilities here in a little bit.
Yep.
And then kind of the other two key themes, which I think is a bit more in the emerging category, but still just as important. We're seeing this rise of the IQ layer, kind of the intelligence layer. And I think where this is coming from is once you've got your data unified, you're starting to leverage agents. Those agents really need to understand not only single tables or rows of data, but they need to understand all the relationships between those different tables and things. So just like us as humans know that we have customers that buy products that we ship out of warehouses and distribute with trucks and vehicles, that understanding of the relationships and kind of how those things are all related becomes essential when you're looking to do some more advanced use cases with AI. So we'll talk a little bit about this, but one of the platforms that was released was Fabric IQ, and this concept of an ontology, which came out of Palantir and some of the other kind of more enterprise grade technologies. It's a way to really kind of map and understand your business from a machine readable type format. So some really exciting stuff there. And then the final one, and I think we'll touch on this slightly here today, is this concept of kind of data apps. I mentioned at the beginning that you might have taken a best of breed approach when selecting a CRM and ERP. And usually the idea was that you either are going to buy it or build it. And for the last decade, the buy has always been the winner. I'm going to buy a SaaS tool that solves most of my problems, not all of them. And I'm going to really just build something very customized to me if and when I need it. Well, now the power has kind of shifted back where, with vibe coding tools, with your data in one place, you can actually build these very customized, tailored experiences based on your business, your know-how. And Fabric is really the enabler to help customers do that. So the through line is that AI is no longer just at the top of this stack. AI is really at every single layer, whether it's extracting data, organizing data, activating data. And so just really want to kind of talk through what that means for customers today. So some really exciting themes that we wanted to share with this group. And underneath all this is something that we want to touch on in a little bit specific, but underneath all of that goodness is what's called One Lake. And this is something that we did want to touch on. We think this is kind of the key breakthrough for folks that are investing in Fabric, is that even if you were to invest in other technologies to analyze that data, you're often having to kind of copy data. So we often deal with kind of siloed operational tools. One thing we really want to caution is really try not to silo your analytical data. If all of a sudden you've got multiple copies all throughout your organization, you're probably going to start getting different answers. And so that's one of the key things about what's called One Lake. If you're not familiar, maybe you've heard of OneDrive, which is kind of all your documents and things that you might share amongst a team. One Lake is really the same thing for your data. How do you organize that data so that you can share it across data engineering teams, analytics teams, governance teams, AI? This is really kind of the unlock that allows all of this to happen downstream. And so what's happening, right? So we talked about some of those themes at Fabric. What's kind of the overarching change that we're seeing in the market? And I think the big thing is that when you thought about, business intelligence and dashboarding, maybe a decade ago, it was a lot about, what happened. Okay, let's surface the data, let's get some metrics, let's understand kind of how we did so that then we can make decisions for the next quarter. And really kind of the cycle was people going away, doing things, coming back together, making decisions, going away, coming back and doing things. Kind of in this new world where we're leveraging AI to get the data in faster, to get it cleaned faster, to surface it faster, to make it more enriched and more valuable. Those conversations are happening on a cadence that's intraday, right? So we're starting our morning by looking at our data. Things change halfway through. Now we're making a game time decision on how we handle a particular issue. And then at the end of the day, we've collected data on that data to be able to make even richer and deeper experiences. And so we're seeing that with Fabric, analytics is really taking on kind of a new meaning where it's more of that lighthouse that's allowing us to kind of guide and just decide how we should move forward. And we're surfacing those insights kind of in our daily workflow. So this is kind of the big shift that we're seeing happening. I know we're going to show a little bit of that here in just a minute, but for anybody listening today, we want you to start to think about as analytics is not just simply that static dashboard that you go to check to see, what happened and why, but now think about it as that kind of companion, co-pilot, agentic capable, digital colleague that can help you support you, throughout your daily workflow. I think that's the big shift that we're seeing happening right now. And kind of final slide before we get into some of the fun demo and kind of walking through the capabilities is, beyond all of this, so we just talked about that future where, we're moving faster, we're making decisions quicker, we're, amplifying our efforts through things like AI. That can really only scale as fast as you can trust it, right? So how do we make sure that we are governing it at every layer? And so back to that idea of kind of one platform to support all of these needs. How do you catalog and understand what data is free for all to use, what should be more constrained? How do we make sure that personal information is managed and maintained? How do we look at the ability to allow everyone to access this data, but only within the scope of their role or their job? That's where we're really looking at things like row, column, and object level security. One of the great things is maybe we've got different teams across the world and they each need to look at the data a little bit differently. How do you actually govern that in one place so that doesn't become kind of a bottleneck to your delivery? And then this is probably the biggest thing, and we'll touch on it, is what's that quality level of the data? When we ask those questions and we get the answers, that answer may be right, but is that simply because the data isn't in the state that we want it to be? And so how do you set up those kind of freshness SLAs or alerts so that we're kind of constantly building this self-reinforcing, self-healing system that really lets us move quickly at every step of the way? So not a small amount of stuff. Just a bit was launched at FabCon.
Not a light topic.
And so what we wanted to do is, rather than kind of just hear me talk about it and touching through those bullet points, we wanted to show you a little bit of what would this look like in the real world. And so for those that aren't familiar, we're going to be showing the Microsoft Fabric platform. So I'll be passing it over here to Tony in just a moment. There are other platforms out there, but we're quite partial to this. If you're already invested in the Microsoft ecosystem, we have found that kind of the time to value for customers is dramatic. You're able to get up and running within a matter of weeks. You're starting to get value out of it, but it's really built to scale and built to grow, across no matter what those different, use cases and workloads are. So without going into this diagram too much detail, I want to go ahead and pass it off to Tony so that we can kind of talk through the demo for today, and you'll start to see quite a few of these elements come together.
Great, and so I think hopefully my screen is starting to share. Sarah, are you seeing it okay?
Yep.
Or
I'm seeing your background, your desktop.
excellent.
Background.
And then now is hopefully Fabric is showing in all its glory.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we're going to walk through about probably 15, 20 minutes of demos. Please ask questions if you've got that. But as Jordan mentioned, we wanted to kind of show Fabric, but also show how it becomes that fuel for this new ability of using AI really for your analytics, and this concept of having this always on, always ready data to provide all those insights that businesses need to make decisions at the speed that business moves today. So this is the main screen in Fabric. The key thing here, as Jordan kind of mentioned, it's all in one place. It's a single set of consolidated tools that can do all kinds of things from a data standpoint. So Microsoft's done a really nice job of pulling everything that you need to do to set up a modern data estate, even to the point where other tools are starting to plug into this. And commonly, one of the things that we talk about is you've got to really organize that data. As Jordan mentioned, you want to govern it, you want to get it in place. We had done a webinar, I think a few months ago, where we kind of walked through this concept of medallion with different structures. So I won't go into that detail today, but it is this idea of we're going to move data from its raw state. We're going to bring it in, we're going to organize it, and then we're going to curate it for the various outcomes. What's kind of fascinating is you get into the world of AI, what you need for AI versus what you need for a dashboard, which you maybe need to use from an integration standpoint. Those data formats are different, but the source of the data is always the same. And so that's why we really like this structure. It also, as Jordan mentioned, one lake is a lot like OneDrive for files, but it's now spun up for data. And so what you can do there, mute phone is a reminder to myself next time. But what you can see here is I'm looking in the bronze data structure. And what's really interesting here is regardless of the type of data, whether it's like Jordan mentioned, database data, data warehouse data, real-time data, which is quite fascinating. And we'll show some examples of that today. It all sets in the same modern data state, and it all has a common format underneath. So here I'm looking at an event house, a KQL database, a SQL database, a SQL warehouse, a SQL lakehouse. Doesn't really matter what those data formats are. They all come in to this consolidated modern data state. And several big advantages of that. One, it's in one place, so it's much easier to build things on top of it. But two, as Jordan mentioned, the governing and the security is all done right here in the platform. And you can use the tooling across all of this. And we're going to kind of walk through that. But what I can do is with my data, I have operational data. In this case, we're going to talk about a company called Beacon. It's a fictitious company. But today we're in the trucking industry. And so we are moving trucks around. We've got long haul terminals at basically major locations within the US. And we're moving a lot of things around, and we need to be able to monitor that, both in terms of some static data, in terms of who the drivers are, who the customers are, but then we're going to get into things like loads and maintenance events and routes and service tickets. So all kinds of data, some of it real time, some of it near real time, some of it loaded on a continuous basis. But now we're going to start to try and get a lot of insights on top of this. I don't know about anybody else, but I don't want to sit and have to write SQL on top of all this to figure it all out. But then you bring in things like real-time data. So this is now quite fascinating. This is load events. So this is a dispatch system. So as trucks get loaded, it's telling us the status of that route and how things are moving. I can also watch the trucks through telematics, and I can pick up things like engine failures, high RPMs, running too hot, et cetera. So this is an idea of real-time data. And in the trucking industry, you also have to watch how long the drivers have been on the road. So there's tracking for all of that. And this is in a completely different format because it's real-time data. And this is actually using something called a KQL database. So man, if I wanted to query this, I'd have to learn how to write KQL. Well, now I'm running SQL, I'm running KQL, I'm maybe running some Python, and I'm just trying to answer business questions. And so one of the things that Microsoft introduced, and Jordan talked about this, is this concept of Fabric IQ. So what Microsoft's done, and as Jordan mentioned, there's been others out in the industry that have done this, is how do we take this data and start to organize it more into a business context? One, to make it easier for business users, but what's also really interesting is that starts to get it formatted appropriately for AI, because AI reasons over this data. And yes, you can teach it to write SQL, you can teach it to write KQL, but imagine if it could get a good idea of what the business context is and start to deal with things in terms that we all think of. And so what Microsoft introduced for that at Fabric is something called ontologies. And Jordan wrote about this. But what this is an ontology for this trucking industry that we're going to use for the demos as we kind of move through forward. And then the key thing here is it's kind of back to school in terms of talking about things in nouns and verbs. So yep, we got to dust off the grammar book and make sure we get back to that. But as you start to clip into this, it really is more the way we all think about our businesses today. So in this case of the trucking industry, the real key, of course, is the customer. So the customer, I'm going to be going on a trip, and I'm going to be taking a load of basically, goods to them. So this concept of a trip becomes really important. So I have a load for a customer. I have a trip carries a load to that customer. All makes sense, right? Conceptually. I have to have a driver on that truck. So the driver also needs a truck, and that truck needs a trailer. And so all these things start to come together. Notice I didn't talk about, is this in the SQL database? Is it in the Lakehouse? Is it in the KQL database? Is it somewhere else? It's just this idea of business concepts. And then if you think about a trip follows a route, and that route has an origin and a destination. And those origin and destinations for a long haul trucking company are to and from terminals, so locations across it. And I hope everybody's seeing this. This is the way we all kind of think and we talk. And so this idea of an ontology becomes really, really interesting, because now everything here has data associated with it. So you can see for customers, I've got things like name, contact number, email, etc. So kind of makes sense there. From a trip, I've got a trip ID, a trip number, I've got the driver, the truck, the etc. that's associated with it. This is where it becomes interesting. As I look at the loads, now I've got things that are getting picked up and delivered associated with a route. And if we look at a route, as you would expect, it's kind of to and from. But this is what becomes really interesting. Those routes have estimated. We've all gotten it, right? You order something from Amazon and you expect it to come in on Tuesday, and it comes in 2 days late. Wouldn't it be nice if you got notified of that? Well, this is the stuff that starts to let you do some of that. And then we're going to go from into a terminal. We're going to have a trailer, and we're going to have a truck. This is interesting on the trucks too, is because you can start to monitor things like engine RPM speed. Is it having sort of overheating? How is it doing in terms of its fuel capacity? Very important today to be able to monitor all that. But notice again, I'm not saying anything about where this data resides, how it gets queried, etc. And I'm now using the ontology, which you'll see in just a second, to actually instruct AI on how to query this. So now everything starts to get built on top of this idea of an ontology. And so what you're able to do now is we're going to now take all of this wonderful data that's in Fabric. We're going to put this Fabric IQ level on top of it, which is that intelligence. And now we're going to start to query it, and we're going to teach, most importantly, AI how to also query it. So as Jordan mentioned, one of the key things that we saw out of FabCon this year was not only this idea of Fabric IQ, but this idea of building data agents on top of it. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just really quickly, this is, as Jordan mentioned, this has gone GA in Fabric now, and we had a chance to be in the preview for it. And it's really fascinating. So it is taking probably the overused term Copilot, but this is Copilot now inside Fabric and aware of that ontology that I just told you about. And now what I can do is I can teach this data agent what the data means and the type of questions that I want to ask it. And this is the key where we're seeing a lot of improvement in terms of the accuracy of AI. We've probably all heard of this idea of hallucinations that can occur where AI will give you an answer even though the answer is not the correct answer. Well, using a data agent, what you're able to do now is you start to be able to ground that agent so that it can answer questions quickly, but also more importantly, accurately on top of that data state that you pulled together. So what you do, very much like if you've used ChatGPT or Claude or one of the others, you give this agent instructions. So in this case, this agent is a trucking operations assistant. It has access to that ontology that I just showed you. It also has access to the real-time event database that I showed you, so that it can get real-time data if it needs to. And that's a pretty interesting concept, because this data can now be flowing constantly. And if you think about it, we all have areas in our business where you've got this idea of near real-time or real-time data where you need to get those notifications and those indications to make business decisions. So now I'm training the agent on it. And so I've told it, go get that information from the ontology graph. Notice I'm not telling it what SQL to write. I'm not telling it what KQL to write. I do want it to go look in the notes on that dispatch system, because what happens is the dispatchers, if they think an arrival is going to be late, they go in and put a note called alert late arrival time expected. So it's free text. It's not actually a status field. And then I also want to tell it, for trip status, even though the actual field is in progress, completed, or scheduled, just use common English terms like active, in progress, completed, done, finished, scheduled, future use, etc. So I'm starting to teach the agent how we humans will ask questions of it. And so now I can start to interrogate it. So the agent has been attached to that ontology that I showed. So I'm just going to ask you the really simple question. What I'm going to say is, can you give me a list of the drivers' names and phone numbers in the state of California? I've got an urgent load, so I want to make sure I get the right driver. So again, notice I didn't tell it what queries to write. I didn't tell it what SQL to run. I just said, hey, go get me these names and phone numbers of these drivers. And you're going to see in just a second what it's doing here right now. We can look at this is it's crawling through that ontology, figuring out, oh, I want to go to the driver entity and I want to look up the driver's phone numbers. And I want to look up the driver's phone numbers who live in the state of California. And hopefully in just a second, it's going to come back with that list for us.
I think what's
I
so
should have
cool
said this is I
is
should have said this is a preview. This little piece right here is a preview. So hopefully the demo gods will be kind today.
yeah, I was just going to comment. I think what's so cool is the ability to kind of use just general natural language like we often do, but then actually scope it in, some of those statuses and things like that. So
And normally it's a little quicker than this, could because of the GoToMeeting, but we'll find out but let's look at what it's doing. What it's actually doing, this is kind of interesting, is it now wrote essentially a query. It's called a graph query to go pull that list to bring that data back. I promise it does actually work. So hopefully it'll come back here in just a second. And if not, I'll start it. There we go. So it's having a little bit of an issue. I did say it was preview, so it looks like it's having a little bit of issue. So we'll just reset it here and try it one more time. And if that doesn't work, what I'll do, Sarah, is I'll add a screenshot or a little short video on how this actually does work.
Fantastic.
Let's try it one more time. What it should come back with is the actual names. Looks like it's bad at this time, but there we go. 18 trips are in progress. I actually, how many trips are in progress? So I skipped to the next question. And what I'm going to do, and I'll come back to that other one in just a second. But what I'm going to ask it now, and this is what becomes interesting. So this is now going to dig into that real-time data. So what it's saying now is show all the trips that are at risk of a late arrival. If you think about this, it's got to go into the trip entity. It's got to then go find the route. It's got to go find the estimated arrival date for that route and check to see if they're on time or not. So it's actually using the telematics off the trucks in terms of where are they, in terms of where they're supposed to be on their route. And notice it was smart enough to go to that event-based database first, and then you're going to see if it's working correctly. It'll come back and look through the ontology. So it found the events that had that note. Here we go. There we go. This is actually a harder query, which is kind of funny. So this one went quite quick. But notice it's pulled back. There's 18 trips right now that are off schedule, and it's showing me the ETAs. But imagine if I was a dispatcher and I wanted to basically do some automation here that, hey, if the trip is going to be more than, let's say, an hour late, let's go ahead and send a notification to the customer that we're en route, we're going to be there, but we're going to be an hour late. This is the types of things that you can now do with this. What becomes really fascinating is we don't all have fabric licenses, nor do we probably want to have fabric licenses. We probably want to access this in things like Teams or Microsoft 365. So one of the things I can do is I can publish this data agent wrapped around security to a set of users where they can use in a tool that they're a little more comfortable with. So in this case, I'm going to publish this agent and I'm going to make it available up in the agent store so that I can use it with Microsoft 365 or I can use it in Teams. Now, I've already done that, so I'm not going to go through the publish process again because it takes a couple minutes. But what I'm going to do is come here now and notice I'm up in M365. I could also see this in Teams if I wanted to, but now I'm taking the main Copilot in Microsoft 365, and now this is where it gets fast. I'm going to have an agent talk to an agent. So the Microsoft 365 Copilot is now going to talk to that data agent. And so what I'm now going to say is, hey, can you show me a count of trips by status? And so what it's doing now, and if you notice in just a second, what it should do is, hey, you're asking me a question about trip status. Ooh, I think I have an agent out here that will answer that. And hopefully in just a second, it'll call that data agent. And there you go. So it realized that, hey, that's the agent I need to go to get an answer on this. And so what it's going to come back now is it's going to show me the status of all of my trips, in terms of, are they completed, are they scheduled, or are they still en route? And there we go. Got 18 that are actually in progress. We've got 10 that are completed and 2 that are still scheduled. But you know what? I want to focus in a little bit more. I want to tell it, can you show me that only for terminals in California? And there's only one of those. And you're going to see something interesting with this one. Because in California, in the data, what I know is there's not all statuses that are available. And it's smart enough to understand that. So we'll come back here in just a second. So it's saying there's no there's no trips. Sorry, I misspoke. There's no trips in California, so it knows how to actually bring that back for me. So it is intelligent too, that if it queries and it doesn't get any data, it will give you a response back. But now, interestingly, because I'm in the M365 Copilot, not only do I have the ability to call the data agent, but I have the ability to do all the things that the M365 Copilot can do, which is like organize data, generate an Excel spreadsheet. If you want to go so far, you can even start to build some PowerPoints with this. So now what I want to do, and I'm recording this one previously because it takes a little bit longer, but what I can do is give a prompt like this. So what I can say is, hey, can you create a table that shows a count of all trips by status and each column? So I want each status in a column. I want to do a row for each terminal, and I want to add a total for each row and also a grand total. So what it did now, when I told it to do that, is now it's going to combine skills. So it went out and said, okay, I'm going to go call the data agent, but when I get it back, I'm actually going to generate that into a pivot table. And so it knew enough too that what I was asking for is a pivot table because I'm actually summarizing. So notice it went through each hub. It pulled back completed, in progress, and scheduled, gave me a grand total at the bottom, and actually a row total for each of those, and does that in about a minute, minute and a half. Imagine, we've all done this. I go to the tool, I export as a CSV file, I pull it into Excel, I manipulate it, I filter it, etc. But now what I can do is, hey, you know what? I'm going to be a little lazy here. I just want you to prep this now as a formatted table in Excel. So now it's going to take that data because it knows Excel, and it's going to actually drop it into an Excel for me. And here's the Excel that was actually exported. So again, this end to end took me about 2 to 3 minutes to run it in Copilot. Would have taken me, 15, 30 minutes, et cetera. And this is something I could actually hand off to others and make it really easy to do. So I've used now the M365 Copilot with the data agent, and I've actually generated a summary report in Excel that I could send to someone else. And this is back to that idea that Jordan mentioned earlier, is this is all coming from one common data state that agents have been trained or grounded, so the results are much more accurate than you're going to get, by manually manipulating this. And I didn't have to do it. The agent did the work for me. So now let's take this one step further, because as Jordan mentioned, not only can I do this with the agents and the data coming from Fabric, but maybe I want to build a little app, a data app, so that people that aren't using M365, aren't using Teams, aren't using the data agent, can get access to the same capabilities. And as Jordan mentioned, it's very much easier now to create these little simple apps to do this type of work. And so I'm not a developer, as Jordan knows. I am what I did is I asked it to create, hey, take that same data that's over in Fabric, pull it together, build me a simple app that shows trips, drivers, loads, and then a general tracking system on it, and give me the ability to filter customer, driver, and status. So this is that same data, using that same data agent, but now being represented up in a very queryable view, that this could be available to anybody. But I can go and, basically in the drop downs by customer, by driver, et cetera, I can change statuses. I can go see everything that's completed, that's in progress, scheduled, and I'm very quickly flipping between that data. I can see the drivers, and so I can do the same thing. I want to see the drivers by, let's say I'm interested in drivers from Atlanta. I want to look at, drivers from each place, or I want to search on it. Gives me that capability. I can do the same thing with loads. And so now I can look at, well, show me all my loads that are in different statuses, different origins, different destinations. So I want to see, let's look at everything going into Chicago. So these are the 4 trips that are currently scheduled in Chicago. I can flip back, but notice how quickly it's actually interrogating the data. But where it gets really exciting is you can also mash this up with other tooling. And so what I've done here is I put it on top of an Azure map. And what I've asked it to do is come back for each terminal and show me the origin and the destination count, but also notice the green and the red dots. Well, what the red dots mean is that destination, that hub, does have a trip that's going to be a late arrival. And so very quickly, I can kind of get some status information. And again, as we mentioned before, you can do notifications, but again, using that same data agent, now laying it on top of the map. And I'm really curious on this situation in Chicago where I've got 2 coming in and 4 going out. So I'd like to get a little bit more detail. So just to show this is still AI underneath, I can ask a question like this. I can go, can you show the trips for Chicago as either the origin or the destination in the table with trip, driver, customer, origin, and destination? So very similar to what we did in M365, it's going to go out, query the data, pull back those 6 trips from Chicago, and tell me whether they're an origin or a destination. And I've asked it to put it in a table for me. But again, I'm completely outside of Teams, completely outside of M365. I'm not in Fabric. I've just got this little app that's actually talking to the data agent and then pulling back that summary data. And this is the future. We think of a lot of this idea of I want to use AI. I want to enable, kind of everybody out in the organization to be able to interrogate and use it regardless of their role, and provide it back in a really simple, intuitive, kind of custom type app for each of them. And that's this concept of a data app, which we're seeing a lot of interest in this right now. So I think I met my time schedule there, right, sir? I think I got that in about 15 minutes, but
I did
lot
covered a
there.
lot.
Lot there. So again,
In a
just kind
short
of what
amount
we
of
did is
time.
we have that data foundation in Fabric. We built an ontology which described the business. We then built a data agent where we taught it how to query that ontology. Then we used that data agent in Microsoft 365 Copilot, and then we also used it in a data app. Everything was built off that single data platform, and everything was in one lake in that really secure governed environment that Jordan talked about. So it really is, we think, the vision of Microsoft as they start to talk about Fabric and Fabric IQ.
Awesome.
And with that, I think I pass it back to you, right, John?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and share my screen as well so everyone's seeing that. But yeah, thanks, Tony. That was really quite impactful to see that full journey really going from, just raw tables that came out of different places into a queryable format, and then now actually surfacing it both through things like dashboards, but even, Sidekick applications or data apps. So really quite cool there. And so what we kind of saw was just agents, apps coming together into one operational workflow. And we think this is really what kind of the 1 in 4 that are getting success out of AI are doing things like this, where they're creating those kind of unique experiences on top of Fabric. Didn't show it a lot here, but imagine now looking at things like that terminal and being able to reroute certain trucks to other terminals, et cetera. Now kind of the actionability that you can kick off from there, starting all kinds of workflows and things of that nature. And kind of the key piece, and this is the hardest piece that we all know is needed to be there, but don't necessarily want to have to spend the engineering time doing, is all of that security and governance. So, we didn't show it, but you could log in with your Microsoft Entra account. We could scope that data to your role. When you're interacting with the agent knows who you are and scopes the data to your role, et cetera. So, a lot of that scaffolding or kind of security governance that is all wrapped around this is really essential. But kind of the idea is in a couple of clicks, you can get the data you need, make a decision, take an action. We're no longer waiting for, reports and things like that. So a really pretty cool future that we're all marching towards collectively. And so kind of, what's the payoff of all this? And I touched on it just briefly is historically this kind of life cycle of extracting the data, getting it organized, enriched, ready for use, kind of building it out for that end use case. And then really what we like to call activation, which is how do you, enable that data to surface and be part of your business flow. This cycle used to take a lot of time. You would get to kind of a daily, hourly cadence. We're seeing a lot of compression here, where now all of a sudden you can go from that key insight to now operational impact, where imagine if you were able to route the truck to the right place, save the load, you just pulled in some additional revenue. You're doing that 10, 15 times within the month, within the quarter. Imagine the dramatic operational impact that you're having for your business, both from a top line standpoint, from a bottom line standpoint, from an employee engagement and enrichment standpoint. And even your customers are going to feel this on the outside because they're getting answers quicker. They're able to be a part of the process and kind of really engage with you in new and exciting ways. So this is that shift that we're seeing, really analytics being, no longer being the static, informational page, but now really that active companion in helping you deliver on your business goals. So really, really excited. Couple things just to wrap up, as I think we're nearing the 45-minute mark and want to make sure that we've got time for questions or any kind of curiosities in the audience. But really kind of our three takeaways after we showed you all that is, when you're thinking AI, think data. Your data platform is really just as essential as your AI strategy. As the models become more commoditized, more available, similar capabilities, the data layer is really going to be that competitive advantage for mid-market companies that are looking to really jump ahead. We like to think about this as adopt a unified approach versus kind of a built stack or a bolt-on stack. Thinking about all of what Tony just showed you today. Imagine trying to stitch that together as an IT manager or an IT group. It's next to impossible in our opinion. So align yourself with partners that have done this and can kind of really help you jumpstart what you're trying to do. And then 3, think about how you can start to go from that insight to action. Thinking beyond just simply what were our KPIs and metrics, but what can we actually do about those in real time in our daily workflows? How can we actually close that loop and drive value daily, versus kind of that reactive approach that we often see with BI. So those are kind of our top 3 takeaways. If you guys have any thoughts or questions, happy to answer those. And even post this webinar if you're exploring some of the Fabric concepts. Happy to be a resource for you as well. And with that, I think that teases up to kind of our offering for today as we're landing the truck into the terminal here as we're finishing up our analogy today. But one of the key things we did want to offer as those that are part of this group have kind of listened in, heard some insights, would love for you to start to ideate and envision, how could this apply to your business? Maybe it's not trucking, but maybe it's in another physical business. Maybe you're in the consulting world, the nonprofit world, the manufacturing world. All of these different industries have their version of what Tony showed today. So one of the things that we're offering, and we've got a great QR code here if you want to scan that to kind of quickly jump to this link, we'd love to offer an AI strategy session. So, over the course of about 30 minutes, we can assess your business, kind of understand where you're at in terms of your AI readiness, and come out with a quick prioritized set of steps that you can take today. I'm happy to do this just to really engage and hopefully guide you towards that more insightful and actionable future. So I'll pause here for a moment if anybody wants to go ahead and scan the QR code. I'm sure we'll provide the link as part of the follow-up from the webinar. So yeah, I'm excited to see if anybody would like to take advantage of this.
Fantastic. You can even, if you want to leave it there, I can jump into some questions. So just a reminder to folks, if you have questions, go ahead and drop them into the question box. I have a couple to start. First one, and I guess either one of you can take them as I throw them out at you. But how do we know if we're ready to move beyond individual AI use cases to something more operational?
Oh, that's a good one. You want to take it, Jordan?
Yeah, I can kind of speak to that. And this is kind of the progression we see. So a great question is, a lot of folks initially are thinking about kind of personal productivity with AI, right? We're going to buy Copilot licenses. We're going to save our team a little bit of time as they're, answering emails, drafting documents. A lot of what we showed today is kind of the next level where as a team, we're going to want to work together and engage AI. And we think that's the big unlock for most companies. The personal productivity will be table stakes. We think of it as the same as versus sending a physical, envelope mail versus email. Everyone's going to have those capabilities. Where you can differentiate as a company is starting to get thinking about, okay, how as a team can we engage AI like a digital colleague? And so, in terms of that readiness, kind of going back to the theme of today is, what is the state of your data? That's likely going to be the blocker to going from that personal productivity to the kind of team and operational based AI use cases. And so we'd love to understand, can you, access all that data in one place? Is it governed? Is it ready for AI? That would likely be kind of the quick assessment that we'd want to go through to make sure that you can go from personal productivity to more of a competitive advantage type AI use case.
Great. And I guess a good follow-on question is, where should we start if we're struggling to pull data from certain systems?
Yeah, you want me to take it, Jordan? You certainly have
Yeah,
some
you,
comments.
you can go
We
ahead
talk
and grab
about
one.
we talk about this a lot, and the place to start is kind of those core systems where you're trying to get answers commonly where it crosses multiple systems. A classic example is CRM and ERP and maybe marketing, where you need some data across it. And there's no true easy button for it, but if you do go on the journey and you go on the path to get that pulled together, as Jordan mentioned, the benefits that come from that are significant, but it is some work. The interesting thing is we often see too, when we go through that exercise, and we call it setting data foundation, you'll get lots of benefits that even go beyond AI. We've had several clients now where we pulled that together and just simple workflows, simple, like Jordan mentioned, who are our top 10 accounts become much more measurable, because then the second question is top 10 accounts around what? Revenue, marketing, et cetera. And so setting that data foundation really helps on that. And we'd be happy to kind of guide in terms of how to do that. But obviously, we really like bringing all that data into Fabric. Certainly, you want to add there?
No, I think one of the things that we do, and that, like Tony mentioned, is each source system's a little unique, and that's usually that foundational hurdle. But one of the best things is that investment really compounds and pays dividends. So if you take the time to start, connecting and extracting the data, that foundational element, it's kind of slow is steady, steady is fast. That if you kind of get it moving and get it going in the right direction, it just sets you up for a brighter future on the other side. So it's definitely worth the investment from our perspective.
Great question.
Well, that looks like that concludes our questions. Again, if you do have follow-up questions, we will be sending an email with the resources that we went through today, and we'll be following up. So please go ahead and reach out and we can answer those questions. Before we wrap up, Jordan and Tony, any final thoughts?
From our perspective, I would just say that, like we mentioned, as much as AI is grabbing the headlines, data is the key. And so really thinking about, if you want to go beyond the hype, if you want to be pragmatic and practical, and you want to drive towards that hard ROI, that true value, start to think a little bit data whenever you hear AI. I think that's the key takeaway from my seat.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'd echo that, and don't forget, kind of related to that as you start to bring this data together, don't forget about governance and security. I don't know if anybody's probably all watching the news right now. Those that don't, think about that, really open up to some pretty significant security risks. There was a company I won't name that just had a whole production database deleted recently because they let somebody, launch an AI agent without thinking about the governance on it. So that's one of the things we pride ourselves as part of Atlantic is pragmatic, practical, effective, AI and data, but with the proper governance and security. So happy to talk to anybody about that, but don't skip that step.
Great. Good advice. Thank you, Jordan and Tony. And thank you again, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate it. And hopefully this gave you a clearer picture of what's changing and what actually matters when it comes to AI. As I mentioned, if you have any questions come up afterwards, or if you want to continue the conversation, please don't hesitate to reach out. And we're really looking forward to connecting with you soon. Thanks again, and have a great week.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody.